Ready? Commissioner Sellers, you ready? I don't see her there. There she is. Let's hope she's on. I'll go ahead. We'll open the meeting for the August 22nd of 2023 Lawrence City Commission meeting. We will start with an executive session. I ask for a motion.
I move we recess an executive session for approximately 30 minutes to discuss employer-employee negotiations pursuant to the employer-employee negotiations exception as set forth in KSA 75-4319B3. The justification for the executive session is to keep employer-employee negotiation matters confidential at this time. The City Commission will resume its regular meeting in the City Commission room at 5:30 after the executive session is concluded.
Second?
I got a first and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. the report, and we will recess until 5:45. Commissioner Sellers, you ready? Commissioner Sellers? Commissioner Sellers, are you ready? Can you hear us?
Sir.
She's not paying attention. Okay. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the August 22nd, 2023 Lawrence City Commission meeting. We will begin with some instruction from Sherry, our city clerk.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, everyone. If you are attending this meeting via Zoom, please ensure you are muted and your video is off when you are not actively participating in the meeting. This allows the active meeting participants to be seen on screen. If you have any trouble, you can send a chat, and all chats go directly to the meeting host. The city reserves the right to mute people or turn individual videos off to minimize distractions during the meeting. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. When the mayor calls for public comment, those attending in person should approach the podium to indicate they wish to speak. Those participating via Zoom should use the raise hand function to indicate they wish to speak. Please leave your virtual hand raised until you are called on. Participants will be called upon in the order they appear on the meeting host screen. Again, please state your name before speaking, and all comments will be limited to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Sherry. Commissioner Sellers, I want to make sure you can hear us.
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Thank you. So we will start with item B, approve the agenda. The City Commission reserves the right to amend, supplement, or reorder the agenda during the meeting. Do I have any commissioners that want to reorder or amend the agenda? Nope. Ask for a motion.
Move to approve the agenda?
Second.
Got a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. We're on to public comment. The public is allowed to speak on issues or items that are not scheduled for discussion on the agenda. Comments should be limited to issues and items germane to the business of the governing body. The commission will not discuss or debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes. We'll start with any general public comments.
This is Jeremy Roth-Kushel. I first want to appreciate the members of the commission who showed interest in the citizen participation in pushing for why we needed a fuller written record of what has been said in meetings here, and I want to appreciate the city clerk for deploying it and making it available to the public. A very good example of interested members of the public who, after utilizing general public comment, pulling the minutes over many months of diligent attention to what we saw as an important issue of missing public interest information, it resulted in response from the government that then supplied more public interest information for the entirety of the public. Okay. Meanwhile, a few weeks ago, we had an outrageous example of what I've seen as an ongoing assault. I use that word carefully, an ongoing assault, especially by specific members of the commission and I believe city legal and city manager in terms of attempting to push back, roll back public input in the ways that it has been shown to be effective in just recent months. Okay. Then members of the Chamber of Commerce came on the Zoom call after maybe a few dozen members of the public here in person showed their deep disapproval of this attempted rollback, and then started talking about how maybe the real purpose of this was to serve the chamber's interests by basically saying the only business germane to this commission is that which is germane to the chamber, and started talking about issues of tone and nature, which is directly core to the question of First Amendment violations in terms of policing core political speech here. And so I will note that one of the most consistent members of the public who utilizes their First Amendment protected rights here, Michael Irvey from Lawrence Accountability, who showed leadership from the community in terms of actual responsible citizen police oversight, a lot of other issues, houselessness, etc., is not here tonight. This is because the city manager and city legal used what I think is a retaliatory trespass from public property, and he's been excluded for 60 days, all for actions that do not fulfill the nature of the city manager and city legal's actual ability to enforce that, which calls for good and legal cause. Good meaning good faith, meaning good facts, and then legal. None of that was fulfilled. So I think the city should
Thank you,
rectify this
Chairman.
very quickly.
Other public comment? We'll go to Zoom.
I'm not seeing any raised hands, so.
All right, we'll bring it back to the commission.
I don't know how to raise my hand on this.
Okay, go
It's
ahead.
changed from last time, but I'd like to speak when possible.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, this is Chris Flowers. I wasn't intending to come to the meeting, but then I saw that thing about Michael being banned, and I read through I saw a copy of the email sent to him, and it seems kind of bullshit. I think one of the complaints was following commissioners outside, but I mean, that's public property. I mean, journalists go outside, journalists will follow politicians and ask them questions. So, I see Lawrence accountability as a journalist, since he is covering local news. So I think it's kind of BS to say because he was following commissioners after the meeting. I mean, that's a bit much. I mean, if that's something that's not allowed, you need to clearly. You need to put it in the rules. You can't follow a commissioner out after the meeting and try to ask them questions. But I mean, if you put that as a rule, I think people would roll their eyes and be like, "Well, my gosh, that's like why are you even being a commissioner if dealing with the public asking you questions is too much for you to deal with?" And it blows my mind that you're banning him from the city hall for 60 days. So just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
Any other public comment on Zoom?
That's it.
All right, we'll bring it back to the commission, and we'll move on to item D, which is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and approved by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda by a member of the governing body and considered separately. Members of the public wishing to speak on an item that has been removed from the consent agenda will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. Are there any commissioners that would like to remove an item from the consent agenda?
I would like to remove D8A for voting purposes.
Okay. Anybody else? No? No? All right. If not, I'll ask for a motion.
Move to approve the consent agenda with the exception of D8A.
Second.
Got a first and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. So we'll move on to D8A.
Don't want to belabor any of this or relitigate all of it, but just for voting purposes, of course, I don't think we should encourage landlords to allow property to fall into disrepair and then reward them by giving them incentives.
Right. Okay. Any questions on that? No questions? Then I'll open it up for public comment. Any public comment on this item? Any public comment on Zoom?
Yeah, can I speak on this?
Yes.
This is Flower. Yeah, I would just like to say I completely am on board with Courtney. This seems absolutely BS, and I think y'all need to start actually talking about vacancy tax. Like, that's what we need. We need to be charging people that sit there and let these properties get in this condition where we're now giving them bonuses to do something with it. Instead of giving bonuses to do something with it, let's give a penalty for not doing something with it. So I fully support Commissioner Shipley on this one. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Can I still make public comment?
And just one moment here. Any other public comment on Zoom?
No, Mayor.
Okay, go ahead, Jeremy.
This is Jeremy Rothkushel. I think that this item does point to the larger context of the bigger fundamental economic issues that Lawrence continues to face, and that we need visionary leadership and creative strategy in terms of utilizing these kinds of spaces. And I've mentioned before, and I will mention it again, and I believe that it supplies some very good longer-term and deep context to the discussion that will happen later tonight in terms of budgets and taxes and all that, that one way to do this, that Christopher Flower was mentioning, a penalty on people who leave land delinquent, is the land value tax. It's one of the most American pieces of economic thinking by all economists across the spectrum from left to right. It is considered the fairest tax and the most effective tax, because what it does is it separates the value of land, which was pre-existing to some extent. It's limited in scope in terms of how much exists, and then it separates that from property that's built upon it, that includes human effort. And so then people are then not punished or taxed for improving the value of their land. They're then punished for not improving the value of their land. This is also how many cities such as Pittsburgh have made their way back from a very dilapidated post-industrial core by utilizing these land value taxes. And then one other consideration in terms of this is that you can use it as a way to ensure access to housing. And that if people want to control land, then they pay the actual value, including the public investment into that land that includes public infrastructure, the maintenance of that public infrastructure in terms of maintaining control of that land. People who do not want to control land, such as people who might want to rent, let's say, then can be distributed some small aspect of that land tax that would then cover parts, at least, of their rent. And you would be able to then encourage both actual growth of the necessary housing stock that we need, while also considering those who need access to quote-unquote lower income housing. Thank you very much.
Final call for public comment on this. None. We'll bring it back to the commission for discussion, if any. No?
Move to adopt ordinance number 9940 on second and final reading, establishing a neighborhood revitalization area for 700 New Hampshire Street, and authorize the city manager to execute a cooperative agreement between the city, county, and school district and NRA administration.
Second.
I have a first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Passes 3-2. All right, we're on to regular agenda items. I'll let folks get out of the room.
That was 4-1, correct?
No, 3-2. I said nay.
I'm sorry.
2.
Thank you.
Okay. We're going to conduct a public hearing to consider exceeding the revenue neutral rate for the 2024 budget and consider adopting resolution number 7499 to levy a property tax rate exceeding the revenue neutral for the 2024 budget. So the public hearing is now open.
There we go.
Good evening, Commission. I'm Allie Porter, the Budget and Strategic Initiatives Manager. So tonight we have one presentation, but two items, and that is the hearing for the revenue neutral rate, consider exceeding the revenue neutral rate, and then the public hearing for the 2024 budget. It's a very brief presentation. Agenda tonight will recap our budget, some adjustments since the July 11th presentation, and then those two hearings. Our process to date is outlined before you. You see July 11th is when we presented the city manager's recommended budget. July 18th was when City Commission established the revenue neutral rate hearing, and that notification was published shortly thereafter. And then here we are tonight on August 22nd for the revenue neutral rate hearing, as well as the budget public hearing. Budget summary: the 2024 total budget for revenues is $460.8 million and expenditures of $472.3. This proposed budget is flat with the 2023 mill levy. And there are four accomplishments that we have highlighted through this budget: closing the general fund structural deficit, adding investments in housing and homelessness response, our continued commitment to infrastructure, as well as continued investment in our employees through the compensation plan. Also new this year was the public engagement software known as Balancing Act. So we had 289 total submissions. This allowed participants to increase or decrease service levels to our various programs. The largest increases included street maintenance, housing initiatives, and then ADA compliance. And decreases included Office of the Police Chief, the golf course, and Municipal Services Administration. In addition to changing those service levels on the expenditure side, participants could also increase or decrease revenues, specifically property tax. So on the revenue side, you had 14 participants that increased property taxes, 39 that decreased, and 236 that left it unchanged. So there are a handful of adjustments to the recommended budget. For revenues, staff noticed that there was a revenue error in the general fund. So the city charges a franchise fee on utilities that it provides via a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes. And so revenue from the water sewer fund was not fully accounted for in the general fund, resulting in $810,000 additional dollars. For expenditures, we added 5 firefighter paramedics to assist with leave coverage, and this is a net cost after factoring in contribution from the county, as well as an estimate from the fire medical department for a reduction in the first year overtime. And I say first year because we put in $177,000, and Chief is actually hopeful that that number will increase in future years once these new firefighters get out of their training period for the first 12 weeks. So they won't be able to immediately offset overtime from January 1. And I'm assuming Chief Llewellyn is on, and I just appreciate his patience with me as we work through those numbers. Additionally, we added an assistant finance director, and then we restored a golf course professional as well as a park facility maintenance technician. Those positions were eliminated in the recommended budget due to a budget deficit. And then we eliminated a legal assistant that is coming open through an upcoming vacancy, as well as eliminated the slight deficit in the general fund of about $140,000. So that leaves $153,000 still available. So here you can see those adjustments to the general fund, most notably increase in your transfers in, and then increase in your expenditures. You see that we have our, we're actually above our reserve policy by $191,000. And I realize that's different than the $153,000 you saw on the previous slide, but because our reserve policy is actually 90 days of operating expenses, as our expenses go up, so does our reserve. So some of this 191 would need to be put aside, resulting in the 153 number that you saw on the previous slide. A few other minor adjustments: the opioid fund revenue of $100,000 and expenses of $254. City Commission received an update on this July 18th, I believe. The administrative services fund, this accounts for the assistant finance director position. And then the healthcare fund, there was a transfer from the police department for wellness into the healthcare fund for $85,000. So revenue neutral, the definition of revenue neutral rate is the mill levy required to raise the same amount of property tax revenue as the prior year using the current year assessed valuation amount. So the revenue neutral mill rate would be 30.711 compared to the 33.207 in the proposed budget. So our action items for tonight are to conduct the revenue neutral rate hearing, consider resolution number 7499, conduct the budget public hearing, and then if there's any further direction on the budget resolution that is planned to come to commission on September 5th.
All right, thank you. Any questions for staff? Any questions?
I have a question.
Excuse me, sorry.
I have a question. My name's
Ally, you'll have to wait for public comment on that. This is just questions from the commissioners.
Oh, sorry.
Is the chief on? Did he have anything he wanted to say? Oh, sorry. There he is. Chief Llewellyn. Sorry, Chief.
Good evening, Commissioners. Rich Llewellyn, Fire Chief. I do appreciate the work that Ally Porter and Jeremy did over the course of this budget development process, and we worked closely with her to make sure that our numbers are as accurate as possible, and we're able to project, I think, with some reasonable accuracy where we're going to be at next year as far as the actual budget savings or versus the expenditures for these new positions. So I think it was a fairly accurate number that we came to. Again, always based on assumptions, but I think our assumptions are all valid, and it was a good process. So thank you to Ally and Jeremy.
Okay, any other questions? Commissioner Sellers, any questions? Guess not.
No, sorry. My mute button was sticking. No, I do, but I'm going to wait because I lost a note that I wanted to reference in regards to the opioid funds, and I can't find my note. So I'll wait till we come back for discussion.
Okay. Yeah, I did have a question on the opioid fund. Could you kind of explain why the expenditures are so high versus our revenue? Is that anticipated or?
Jeremy might be hiding back there.
He's in real life.
There he is.
It's hard to hear in that corner. Could you repeat your question?
Yeah, on the opioid funds, could you explain the deficit there? Revenues of 100 and expenses of 254.
Well, it might be a matter of semantics. It's not necessarily a deficit. It's simply revenue that was collected in 2023 that we're setting aside for a larger community discussion in 2024.
Okay. So there's funds available to cover that. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, got it.
As I recall, we got a payment in
I thought-
2023, and we have another payment coming.
Yeah, that's what I thought I read, yeah. Wanted to make
So,
sure.
but we haven't spent any of the money yet. We've only had money coming in.
Got it. And then the other question I had was, could you kind of discuss the fact that our revenues are 460 million, but our expenses are 472 million, where that money's going to close that gap?
Yes. The short answer is the difference between the capital improvement plan for bonds that will be borrowed and also reserves that have been set aside for capital projects in both the general obligation revenue bond or general obligation mill levy bond and the revenue bond for water and wastewater projects.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. If there's no other questions from commissioners, I'll open it up for a public comment.
Hi, my name is David Baston. I just want to, for me, I'd like to decrease the mill rate. And I know that you say you need this much more money, and everybody, our taxes just go up every year. And along with everybody else is raising it too. The Douglas County, I mean, everybody except for the state, they're not raising theirs. So, but I mean, if we just look at our budget over the last 6 years, it's went up 136%. So, like 2018, we were at 200 million. Now you're asking for 472 million. So if we go at that same rate in 6 more years, our budget's going to be $1 billion. So I think we need to work on ways to lower what we're spending instead of just keep adding. And I know there's inflation, but I don't think inflation's 136% in 5 years. So. Yeah, and I've talked to several people that have gotten loans, just making the loans, and every year their taxes keep going up, so it's harder and harder for them to even stay in their homes. So I just think we need to make an example and start cutting back on some things, whether that be, I mean, there's lots of ways that we could do it. Keeping our fire engines a little bit longer, not necessarily police vehicles, because we know they run 24/7, but there's just lots of ways that we can go about saving some of that money and lowering taxes instead of keeping raising taxes. And that's what I've got to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Other public comment on this?
This is Margaret Rozak.
Excuse me, Margaret, excuse me. We'll call on you here in just a little bit, okay? Right now, we're in the room here.
Good evening, Councilman. My name is John Martin. I've been here in Lawrence for a couple of years. I rise up to speak in opposition of the increased mill levy, along with the increased property values. I understand one or the other, having been in your position myself and gone through multiple budget cycles, but increasing both at the same time is double dipping from the public. I've listened and been a part of multiple meetings the past 2 years, heard countless arguments and countless meetings about affordable housing, but moves like this with continually increasing the mill levy and increasing the tax rate for the citizens do nothing but make housing more unaffordable. So in my 2 years of home ownership here, I'm now paying $1,000 more a year in taxes in just 2 years. That's unsustainable for myself, being a single income, family, and it's unsustainable for my neighbors as well. So I would encourage all of you to take a look at tightening your belt, using the word no when these developers come to you with their hands out, or existing businesses, like the one, a block over, comes to you with their hand out. We do need to do more with less in this city, and spend more time focusing on the basics of government, infrastructure, and basic services. So thank you for your time, and I thank you for all you do for the city.
Thank you. Thank you. Other public comment? Come on up.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Masoud Darabi. First of all, thank you for your time and for the hearing. So I hear about that the rate is the same as last year, and I want to just make an example and see if it makes sense. Let's assume that there was a house that was $100,000 last year, and the city or whatever entity you want to name it needed $10,000. So the rate on that obviously would be 10%. Now next year, that same house appreciates as the housing appreciated so much more than everything else to $500,000. The city needs, let's say, $15,000. I mean, last year $10,000, this year 50% increase. So 15,000 of about, let's say, 500,000, we are looking at 3%. Now the city is coming back and said, well, I need the 10%. I need 50,000. So to keep the rate the same, it's really is not the very logical way to do it, because we know that the amount that the housing appreciated has been so much more than, let's say, food and other things, that if you want to keep the same rate, you are basically charging double-fold. One-fold is that in the evaluation and appraisal, of course, I mean, everything went up, and then we are coming back and say, well, you know what? Because people paid the same rate last year, let's make them pay this year too. So I think, I mean, because we are going above the revenue neutral, I really think that the committee needs to think about not increasing it at all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Other public comment on this item? If not, we'll go to Zoom.
Margaret?
Thank you for your time, and thank you for listening. I would implore you to not only take comments, and I will echo the 3 or 4 folks that spoke in person, is that you're double dipping. You are chasing people out of Lawrence. The increases in property tax are not sustainable. Find a different way. I implore you, find a different way. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Margaret. Other public comment on Zoom?
No one else is in.
Hello, this is Linda Weinmaster. I don't see the little hand to raise either.
Linda?
Yes, hi.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just applaud everybody that's come out and spoke about revisiting the budget. There is plenty of places to cut back. Your main duty is to keep the citizens of Lawrence safe. I don't feel safe here. I don't feel I can go out in public safely anymore. Focus on the citizens here that are paying the taxes. Get back to the basics. I sit down with a paper and pen, and I'm one of those unfortunate in the Queens Road not benefiting me districts, and I will be paying over 2% in taxes of what I purchased my house for 6 years ago. This is out of control. We need to get back to the basics. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if you want to speak and aren't sure how to raise your hand, you can turn
Hello.
video on and raise
How
your
are you?
hand as well.
I'm
Other public comment on Zoom?
anyway. Well, I just spoke.
Any other public comment on Zoom?
No.
I'd like to comment.
Yeah, Ally?
Thanks. I've had this house for 13 years now. And, as the neighborhood has changed, I now have 3 $500,000 houses in my neighborhood, which I think has changed the value on my house. And, Lawrence always brags about being so livable and so it's a great place to retire and stuff. And if you're a senior on fixed income with Medicare and Social Security as your main stand, it's hurting me. I'm getting priced out of my house, and there's so much talk about keeping seniors in their houses. Would you consider doing a freeze on seniors' taxes like other states do for seniors who want to stay in their house and live that dream that you guys always talk about?
Anything else, Ally?
No, that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on Zoom? Sherry?
Not that I can tell, Mayor.
Okay. All right, then we'll bring it back up to the commission for discussion at this time. Any discussion? Open the floor.
So to be clear, what we're doing today is adopting the resolution to exceed the revenue neutral, and having the public hearing, but we're actually adopting the budget and the resolution and all of that on September 5th, correct?
Yeah, the actual adoption will be then. That's my understanding. This is just the public hearing aspect of it.
Yeah.
Any thoughts? I had a couple questions for staff, maybe Jeremy. I was wondering if you could speak to a little bit about for David's, I think it's David, who had talked about how our budget has increased significantly over the past 5 or 6 years. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Jeremy Wilmoth, Director of Finance. I would say that the budget has increased over the last number of years as the city has really started to put an emphasis on deferred maintenance of infrastructure. If you were to compare the city's capital improvement plan from 2016, 17, even 18, it's nowhere near the depth and the breadth of what the 2024 capital plan has in mind. A lot of that has to do with staff having time to really evaluate where our assets are at currently, and the level of dilapidation that I think everybody here understands, that the roads are deteriorating, that they need to be replaced, that sidewalks, the loop, et cetera, need to be maintained. And all of that, unfortunately, costs a significant amount of money. And so through the strategic planning process that had inputs from hundreds of...
Just a minute.
What almost never returns that loyalty. Just act.
Sure. Get it? Okay, Jeremy, go ahead.
The strategic planning process that had input from large swaths of our community, we heard over and over again, and I think we've seen in citizen survey results as well, that infrastructure and maintaining those key assets is a high priority for the city. And so what you've seen in our budgets over the last number of years is a real emphasis to target that and make sure that we're adequately funding, or at least to a level that we feel we can continue with our current mill levy without an increase to that mill levy. Those necessary infrastructure projects that had been largely, I won't say ignored, but deferred in years past. There comes a point in time where you have to say, we need to make this investment, and you all, through the strategic planning process, made that investment. And I think we've seen that over the last number of CIP documents that the city has really made an investment in infrastructure. And until we get that infrastructure back to what I would consider to be a normalized or a palatable level, we really won't see a decline in that need. And so to the extent that we decide to reduce the budget in any way of that infrastructure, we're essentially just adding that to the long-term unmet needs of the city, which, if you look at our capital plan, I believe are close to $500 million right now.
The next 5 years, right?
Yep.
Or 5 year. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And in addition, not to Jeremy, but probably to the chief as well, and I think somebody brought up maybe extending the life of our current fire equipment. And if Chief could go ahead and speak to that, because I think we are currently doing that.
Yeah, it was interesting when that question was asked. I can talk about a recent occurrence. A local jurisdiction reached out to ask if we could loan them any reserve apparatus because they were at a status of zero reserve apparatus, and when they had one of their frontline pieces of equipment go down, they were sending folks out in pickup trucks and Suburbans to deal with the emergency, mostly medical emergencies. After talking to our staff about the current status of our fleet, we did not have reserves that we felt were adequate to send to another jurisdiction. And I just want to make sure that our fleet does not end up in the same situation. So we have a process of managing our apparatus that keeps them for what I think is a good life cycle. When they leave the city of Lawrence or LDCFM, they've lived a good life and they're going to other places to be refurbished and then reused. But by the time we get rid of them, they're no longer of much value to us, and we pretty much have used up their useful life. So I think our apparatus plan is fairly effective, but also realistic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Yeah, I'm trying to find her. There you go. Commissioner Sellers.
Yes, can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yay. Okay. So I have a quick question for Jeremy. You know, Jeremy, since I think what is this? We're going into year 3 of revenue neutral rate hearings. And so my question is, have you seen any publication from the state that has done any studies on different municipalities by size and how they've navigated this process of revenue neutral? How many have exceeded their revenue neutral rate rationale, to see if there's trends between different municipal sizes and things of that nature? Is there any type of report that you've seen that's been posted that would give you some guidance, or at least give you a dashboard or something that could tell you how other finance offices from different municipalities are handling this new process?
Jeremy Wilmoth, Finance Director. So I've not seen anything official. I know that the state auditor is working on a report like that for the state. I know I read in the Lawrence Journal World, just looking at Douglas County, I believe 85% of the taxing entities within Douglas County are having hearings very similar to this one to discuss exceeding of the revenue neutral rate. As we discussed at the last meeting, simply trying to keep your revenue flat with the prior year and not taking into account inflation or any of the myriad of expenses that the city has that are in addition to what a normal homeowner would have, just seems to be a very ineffective way of measuring, where the property tax is. So we're following that process as required by state law. But I can't think of a time in Lawrence's history where the property taxes in the next year were ever less than the property taxes from the prior year, simply because inflation is such a large part of everything that we do. The cost of asphalt has gone up dramatically over the prior year. The cost of fuel has gone up dramatically over the prior year. We know that in vehicle purchasing bids, we're seeing bids coming in much higher for not only fire trucks and ambulances, but just simply trucks that are required in the solid waste department or required in the public works department, the parks department, et cetera. And so all of those cost factors continue to challenge local governments, not only in Kansas, but around the nation, in trying to perform at the same level as they did last year with essentially less revenue. If you don't adjust your revenue, you are essentially trying to buy the same basket of goods you bought the year before, but having fewer resources to do them in inflationary dollars.
Anything else, Commissioner Sellers?
No, I do appreciate Jeremy mentioning that. I know this is something that I've asked him on several occasions, just because what we're seeing is a legislative flaw that impacts us locally, and being sure that we are mindful of that and firm and sharing that not only with our local delegation, but also with the powers that be who are on these finance and budget and taxation committees in Topeka, to let them know that there's a flaw in their system.
Any other discussion? Thank you, Jeremy. Or questions?
I would only add add one thing. Speaking of Topeka, there has been some moves to, like some other states have, to cap property rates, when someone hits 65 or otherwise. And we can't do that here at the local level, but it's certainly something that can be considered in Topeka, and something, certainly should be considered. And I guess I would say, I agree, the revenue neutral rate to me, certainly no one likes paying more taxes, and no one should like to pay more taxes. So the question is, form from the budget, and then what do we need to form that budget? And the cost, inflation has gone up, the cost of wages have gone up, and we have, the services that, we believe we need to provide. And, the interesting, well, I'll just say, I do like our budget. I think, we can continue to look at that as we move forward. We actually, I think the additional 5 firefighters is a very important addition to the budget, even more than the recommended budget. And I'm glad we were able to track that money down to fund that. So, I'll go ahead and support the resolution tonight to exceed the revenue neutral rate, and look forward to continued discussions in the hearing on September 2nd on the full budget.
I would second supporting the resolution to go ahead and exceed the revenue neutral rate. Seconding what Commissioner Finkeldye said about our firefighters. We have been asking them to work very long hours and mandatory overtime for quite a while, without any sort of relief. And I'm glad that we were able to get those 5 additional firefighters for them, so that they can go ahead and at least have that. As well as, to my earlier question, we've invested in asset management as well. So we know exactly what we have, how old it is, and what state it's in, so that we can get the most efficiency out of it. And we have made leaps and bounds in infrastructure, considering that it hasn't been addressed in quite a while. So I think we're on the right path.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Sellers?
Echo the sentiments of my previous commissioners, and if someone can find a way to extract Jeremy's DNA so we can use that to clone our assistant finance director, I greatly appreciate it.
Yes, I'm glad to hear that we're
That's my way of saying thank you for the work you've done and your team. And this will be your last budget dance with us, so best wishes to you.
Yes, of course, thanks to all staff members in all departments for not only going through this process, which is very different than it has been in the past, but required sacrifices of everyone. I agree that this is the most appropriate way forward. I'm glad that we were able to find some much needed revenue for some important positions. And so I'm ready to hear.
Okay. I'll just add that, when I was first on the commission, we didn't even have a CIP. We did not have a formal CIP when I was first on the commission. So it was, for me anyway, it was impossible to see what we were actually spending on our infrastructure. And when we started to actually do a CIP, it was very basic. Compared to what we have now, it's extremely robust, and I'm very proud of what we have developed over the years on our CIP. So our community members can actually see the progress we're trying to accomplish. We've been behind in our maintenance and infrastructure for numerous years, and we can actually see some progress happening. I think I looked at one of 2018 or so, I can't remember which year I looked at, when we had one of our early CAPs, we're spending almost twice as much on our infrastructure now than we were back then. That is really important. But that doesn't make the idea that the fact that we're having to pay more taxes any easier. And I understand that. We're all being hit by that. And so as a city, as our staff, I think that we need to, going forward, really start to find ways to kind of scale down the big jumps we're seeing. I know inflation's been a huge factor the last few years. I understand that, but that's starting to settle down, and I think we should take advantage of that to let that reflect in our budgets going forward. Because it's to me, it's getting to a tipping point that we really need to do something to address that going forward. So I think that's mostly what I've got to say. I do appreciate staff, what they've done, and I appreciate those who have spoke tonight, as well as the emails that I've gotten. Believe me, I hear you, but this is a budget that I think is necessary. The other area that we really improved on was our wages. We were so far behind in our wages. In 2018, we did a study to show how far behind we were in our wages, and we were losing highly technical staff and just regular staff at a very high rate. And so we had to come in order to retain quality staff members. It was important. We invested $10 million into that. So that was a huge chunk of money that we really do need to continue that, and wages just continue to match that. And as a community, I think that's something that Lawrence does pride itself on, is to try to pay folks a living wage, as well as try to match that industry as much as possible. So those are the I guess the points that I would make on this. So I'm going to support this. If there's nothing else.
I would add two other things real quick. One, I would add, you've been on the commission a lot longer than I have. I look forward to a kind of a normal budget year. I've had 3 years of COVID and hyperinflation. I look forward to a year in which we don't have any of those, unique situations. So as you say, get back to a place where we can manage that. I guess I'd end by thanking Jeremy. Thank you for all your work. Obviously, thank all the members, but thank you for your service to the city and what you've done in our finance department. You've brought it a long way, and you'll be missed. So good luck on your future endeavors.
Concur. Thank you to all of our financial staff and everybody that contributed to this. So, much appreciated.
Do we need to close the public hearings? And then
they stay open. They stay open, don't they? Sherry?
No, aren't you having a second hearing on the budget? Yeah.
Yeah, we need to close the
Close it and then pass the resolution.
Okay.
Go ahead and pass it. Okay. So close the public hearing? What?
I came in late. Is the public part over?
You know, we've heard from the public already. I'm sorry about that.
Well, I've heard
Okay.
what you have to say. So.
Okay.
Is there going to be another?
Yeah, September 5th, right, is our next one, and we'll have,
Yep.
oh, yeah, we have a second one on the actual budget. This was on exceeding the, yeah, so we've got one more tonight, yeah. And then September, excuse me, sir, yeah, let me finish. September 5th, though, we'll do a final vote on items. So, where do we go from here? We closed it?
You need a motion to adopt.
Yes.
So we move to adopt resolution number 7499.
Do I have a second? I have a first and a second. All in favor? Aye. Commissioner Sellers? I didn't hear you. What was it?
Aye.
Okay, it passes 5-0. Okay, we'll move to our second public hearing, which is to consider the fiscal year 2024 budget.
Staff doesn't really have anything else to present. We're happy to answer questions, but we feel it's appropriate just to open up for the public hearing now.
All right, any questions for staff?
Yeah, I thought they were combined, so.
Yeah, let me go try to find something here. I thought I had something on this. Yeah, we'll go ahead and open it up to public comment. If nobody has any questions, then I'll find what I was looking for. Any public comment on this item? No public comment from the room, so then we'll open it up to Zoom. Anybody on Zoom?
No one has indicated. If you're on Zoom and want to provide public comment on this item, if you could turn on your camera and raise your hand, or you can use the reactions at the bottom and raise your hand virtually. There's no public comment, Mayor.
All right, we'll bring it back to the commission. Any discussion on this?
I thought it was the same, so.
Yeah.
We have time in September to bring it back.
Yes, it'll come back.
Yeah.
Okay. If not,
Did you remember your question?
I can't remember it, and I had it written down, but I forgot to bring. Yeah, I have till September to find it. Had a couple of them, but that's okay.
Okay.
Can we get a motion? Close the public hearing?
Yep. We need a motion on that? Just close it.
Do we need a motion, Sherry?
No, Mayor, you can just state that the public hearing is closed.
Okay, the public hearing is now closed. Thank you. All right, move on to commission items. Any commission items? None? Okay, if not, we'll move on to, I don't see, no, we'll move on to city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. In addition to the two items that are on there, I also just wanted to add my comments to Jeremy and thank him for his service and great appreciation for the work that he did. And I've been here 4 years, and he, definitely the work that he did right before I got here was so helpful in all the things that you described, Mayor, in progressing our city. And it'll continue to be something that contributes to us and builds a foundation that we're going to grow from. So thank you and best of luck. Okay.
Any questions for Craig? If not, this is a public comment item. Any comments from the public on the city manager's report? Any comments from Zoom?
No, Mayor.
All right, then we'll move on to the calendar. Any calendar items that need to be noted or added or deleted? If not, we'll move on to our final item, adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Got a first and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Commissioner Sellers, are you going to vote?
Bye.
Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, everyone.
My God, this is a freaking record.
We heard that, Mayor. Have a good night.
Good night.